All right, hey everybody, this is Rosh, and you're watching FM9 Basics. This is a YouTube tutorial series I'm putting together to help new and experienced users program all their Fractal products, including the FM3, the Axe-FX3, and in this case, the FM9. So a little about myself. Once again, my name is Rosh, and I build and program guitar rigs here in the LA area as well as online. Some of my clients include Steve Vai, Def Leppard, Melissa Etheridge, Perfect Circle, Bush, Maroon 5, and more. So I want to give back to the Fractal community and share some tips and tricks on how to program all the Fractal products. And in this case, this is going to be the second video in a new tutorial series I'm putting on this channel. And this is going to be gig-ready presets. So if you watched a previous video that I had, basically what I'm planning on doing is building some gig-ready presets for sale. You can go to the link below in the description if you want to buy this preset. And basically, my whole goal with this is that I'm going to be building presets using different types of amps, different types of guitars, different, playing styles, different, if you want a channel switching amp, or if you're used to using, just a single amp with a bunch of pedals in front. I'm going to try to cover as many different variables as I can. So I've been asked in the past if I, have any of my presets on the Axe change or have any presets for sale. And I've always generally been a little bit reluctant to do that because whenever I'm building a preset for a client, whether they're, somebody like Steve Vai, or if it's just going to be somebody, online who finds me through this YouTube channel, it's always going to be based on their playing style. Do they strike the strings really hard? Do they strike the strings really soft? What style of music are they playing? What are their goals and what is the sound that they're looking for? Are they a blues player? Are they a hard rock player, a metal player? I mean, there's so many different variables. So I never felt really super, I was always pretty reluctant because there's just too many of these variables to cover in one preset. What if I'm going to be playing, a type of gig where it's going to be like a touring gig for an artist, that's going to be a totally different set of presets versus somebody who's in a cover band. Now, a lot of people have been asking this, so, I felt it was going to be, I could do a more accurate way to, build a preset based on just types of things that I run into a lot. So a lot of my clients, maybe they're, if you're watching this, you're in a cover band, maybe you play at, your local church, maybe you do, you're in a band with your friends. And this is going to be, again, geared not for the power user, but for somebody who's just starting out with any of the Fractal products, and in this case, the FM9. And what this is like you just get it out of the box and you just want some usable sounds that you can take to your gig tonight. So if you're in a cover band, if you just need a wide variety of sounds, that's what we're going to do. And again, the number one thing is I never want a financial constraint to, be present when somebody is using any Fractal product. So you can follow along in this video and you can build this preset totally from scratch if you don't want to purchase the preset in the link below. But if you do want to buy this, support the channel. If you've gotten a lot of value out of the content I've put out over the years, by all means, feel free to go to the Gumroad link below in the description. And Gumroad's a reputable digital seller, so you can just put in your credit card information there, and it'll definitely and then you can download the preset. So, all right, hey, this is Rosh from the future. As I was editing this, I realized that I also didn't mention that if you're planning on using this preset, make sure you upgrade to firmware 8.01. So make sure your FM9 is going to be at least 8.01 as of this recording. That is the latest firmware. If you have a firmware that is earlier than 8.01 on the FM9, then the preset will not load correctly. So make sure you go into the tools menu, use FractalBot, and upgrade to the at least 8.01. And if you are on a firmware after this, by all means, the preset should load correctly. Thanks. Let's just go over the signal path. Now, this preset is going to be for the users who are used to using a single clean amp, and then they just want to use a bunch of different pedals in front of the amp. So if you have come from that paradigm, which many of us come from, where you just have one clean amp and then you use a bunch of different pedals to get different types of gain staging, different types of sounds through that, and you just use a single channel amp, this preset is going to be for you. Now, if you watch my previous video, I dialed this type of preset in with a Les Paul. This preset is going to be using a Strat. Now, a couple things to keep in mind is that my personal Strat is an HSS format, so it has a humbucker in the bridge and then two single coils. The other thing is that my Strat is kind of using vintage voice pickups. So you will hear a little bit of noise coming from the single coil pickups. And of course, what you can do is always adjust the gate to filter out any noise. Or if you use single coil pickups that are noiseless, then you're not going to have to worry about that. So you will see occasionally hear some noise here. And again, that's just because, I do prefer vintage style Strat pickups. But again, this can definitely work for you. So let's go into the first block in the signal path, and you can see I've put the gate here. So if you hear this Strat right here, you can hear a little bit of noise when I'm holding a chord. Now, if I go to, the humbucker pickup, the noise goes away. So you can hear that is totally single coil. That has nothing to do with, the FM9 or anything like that. So of course, if I go to position 2, so that is, neck and middle, then you hear the noise go away as well. So again, this is just the nature of playing a Strat. If obviously all you Strat players, single coil players out there have probably dealt with this from time to time. Now, if you use a noiseless system, then you're not going to have to worry about that. So if you do want to filter out more of the noise, feel free to just take this threshold knob and just turn it higher and higher to get rid of the noise, and it's going to gate out that. But just keep in mind that that's going to affect the sustain of your instrument. So the next block in the signal path is a volume pedal. And some users are used to using a volume pedal on their analog pedal boards right in front of the amp. So I placed it here. Now you can, of course, place it after the amp, and this will not affect the way your distortions and drives work. So for example, if you do have this in front of a drive pedal and then you get the volume pedal to go back, what's going to happen is, of course, it's going to reduce the gain. So here is my distortion sound or an overdrive sound. So you can hear that it just cleans up the distortion using the volume pedal. Now, if I decide to move the volume pedal after the amp, then what's going to happen, of course, is that the volume pedal will just reduce volume without affecting the gain of the overdrive. So that is completely up to you. That is an option. And a lot of users are going to be totally different. Again, the whole idea of this preset is to build something that you can drop into your FM9 right now, use it on your gig tonight. It's supposed to be easy to dial in, easy to tweak. And we're going to be using some performance pages in here so that you can just dial in your sounds on the fly at sound check or at a gig or at rehearsal. And you never have to, pull up FM9 edit. You can just totally edit everything right on the unit itself. So let's bypass this drive. And again, if you want to use the volume pedal here, just all you have to do is drag the volume block from here to here and then just hit save. And now your volume pedal is going to be after the amp, which doesn't affect the amount of gain your pedals use. Or if you're used to the old school way where it does reduce the gain of your pedals, you can, of course, leave the volume pedal here and then just save it. Now, keep in mind that the volume block is going to be tied to expression pedal number 2. So again, if you have your expression pedal calibrated correctly, just make sure that the expression pedal that you're using is going to be in pedal 2. So on the back of the FM9, you're looking at PDL2, and that's going to control this volume block. Now, if you watch the previous video, you'll notice that one thing that I definitely do that I don't do with a Les Paul, if I'm playing a Strat, I am definitely always using a compressor. Now, a lot of people, have a different version of this, and the reason why I use a compressor is, I'm a big fan of, like a lot of single coil players like, Eric Johnson and Andy Timmons. Technically, Andy Timmons plays humbuckers, but he has kind of a single coil voiced kind of thing. Andy Wood. There's a lot of different players. Now, the compressor is going to give you just a little bit more, it's just going to give you a little bit more thickness. You can see the levels up a little bit. It's just hitting the front end of the amp a little harder. And the other thing that it does is that it gives you a little bit more of a uniform volume between all your single coil pickups. Because again, if you use a 5-way blade switch for your Strat, you'll always notice that for example, if I bypass this compressor, if I'm playing the neck pickup on the Strat, if you switch to position 2, you'll notice that there's always going to be this like drop in volume. So, and then if you use a humbucker like me, then there's this big jump in volume. And you'll notice that that can be really, really annoying. So you're either having to ride your volume pedal all the way throughout the gig or whatever, or, you know, some of your overdrives might not react the same way depending on which pickup you use. Again, all you Strat players, this is probably something that you're just very used to. And one of the things that a lot of players do is they use a compressor. And now the compressor isn't really to add a ton of compression. Again, I take a lot of inspiration from Andy Timmons, but it's more to hit the front end of the amp a little harder, gives your pickups just a little bit more girth, a little bit more thickness. And then again, you're getting the amp to kind of react in a very specific way. And it just evens out a lot of the, you know, dynamics between each pickup. So again, here's with the pickups, the compressor off. So I'm going through all 5 of the positions. Now, if I use the compressor, you hear how like going from the neck pickup to the, you know, single, you know, the out of phase in between neck and middle just kind of evens out that volume a little bit. So if you are somebody who definitely switches a lot of pickups during a gig or during a rehearsal, which is definitely what I do, it allows you to kind of even out those volumes. And it also allows that if you strike the strings really hard and then you're picking really lightly, it just kind of evens out that volume. Or if if you play a lot of funk or anything like that, it just makes the dynamics just a little bit smoother. Versus, using the neck pickup. Okay, so I tend to use this type of thing. A lot of people, always use either like a boost pedal or something. It's always referred to as the quote unquote always on pedal. I treat the compressor first in the signal path as kind of like almost like a clean boost with a little bit of compression. And again, this compressor is going to stay on the entire time for this preset. Now, the next up block that we have is a standard wah. I like the Faz wah. That one's pretty great because again, it's not too bright or spiky. Yeah, a pretty standard stuff. You can of course always swap the wah out with whatever wah of your choice. And again, what you're going to do is make sure that the wah, the expression pedal that you plan on using for the wah is plugged into expression pedal number 1 and make sure that it is calibrated correctly. You'll notice that I'm using the PC reset and the auto engage feature so that you don't need to have a toe switch to turn the wah on. All you need to do is just, manipulate the pedal. And one of the things that's going to happen is that the pedal will automatically turn off. So when I use the expression pedal and turn it forward, it turns on. If I go all the way back to the heel back position, toe up position, the wah turns off. And then of course it still functions normally like a wah. So again, I do a lot of like funk and R&B gigs, for top 40 gigs. And again, so you always need that kind of quacky wah sound. So that can be useful. And obviously you can use it, in a rock context, whatever kind of sound that you want. Next up in the signal path, you'll see this send and return. Just make sure that this just gives you a little bit of extra room instead of going all the way across. And just make sure your return level is always set to 100%. Now, if for those users who are planning on using a virtual capo, I left a little space in there. If you want to make a copy of this preset, put the virtual capo in and, tune down a half step so you don't need to bring multiple guitars to the gig. You can do that as well. I would recommend using 2 different presets. Use the same exact preset for both, but just have one with a virtual capo in it and one without. Next up is going to be our overdrive section of this preset. Now, you'll notice this compressor here, and I'll address that in just a quick second. But the 3 drive blocks that I'm using are just going to increase in gain. So this first drive block is basically what I refer to as my clean boost section. And you'll see that in the, not in the performance, in the foot switches that are going to be included in this. And I'll address this in a little bit. So this is going to be a clean boost, different variations of a clean boost, different variations of the second drive block, which is going to be our overdrive section. So this is going to be more for like an overdriven sound. And then last but not least, the third drive block is going to be our distortion portion of this preset. So in each of these, I'm also dialed in 4 different channels for each of these drive blocks. So again, there's so many different types of users, so many different types of music styles, so many different types of playing styles that, I wanted to give a wide variety of sounds to choose from. Again, clean boost to me is just something that makes the amp just kind of grit up just a little bit. Again, we're going for something maybe a little bit beyond edge of breakup or maybe edge of breakup, depending on where you put your volume knob. So the first one in channel A is the FET boost, and it sounds like this. As opposed to just a clean sound. And again, just gives a little bit of hair on the note. You can do something kind of maybe Stevie Ray Vaughan-ish. Gives a little bit of that sting if you're using the neck pickup. Or the middle pickup. And of course, if you use any of the in-between pickups, it can just give a little bit of that, a grit. So again, I find, clean boost super useful, again, even for like almost clean sounds. And then of course you can use your volume knob to kind of adjust how much of it, but it gives a little bit of sparkle. So for those of you who ride your volume knob a lot, that's going to be very useful. And again, there's going to be 4 different variations. So the next one in the channel B is the Tone of Kings. This is the King of Tone pedal. A little less of a sting, a little smoother on top. And then this is going to be the Blues OD. Again, I take a lot of inspiration from Andy Timmons as a player, so this is kind of like his version of the Blues Overdrive. Again, we're going for that kind of Texas blues thing if you're using a Strat. And of course, these sound really great with a humbucker pickup in a Strat as well. And then last but not least, this is going to be the Esoteric RCB, which is the Exotic Effects RC Booster. Again, just a different variation on this. I think this is a little bit warmer and smoother. So if you prefer one of these other flavors in this channel, all you have to do is just make sure, number one, make sure the block is bypassed, select whatever your preferred channel is, and then save the preset. So I'm going to leave it in the FET boost. Now, let's talk about this compressor really quick, because one of the things that some users do and some of our more favorite players do is that they actually put a compressor or some type of clean boost at the end of the signal after their overdrives. And this just kind of smooths out that top end a little bit, gives it a little bit of a warmer sound. And again, using this combination is very, very common, putting like some type of clean boost at the end of the signal path so that when you stack a boost or an overdrive into a compressor, it gives you just kind of a warmer sound, gives you a little bit of that sustain that some users are using for. But again, it doesn't affect the tone too much. So Andy Timmons does this. A lot of other players do this. I think Eric Johnson does this. But one of the things that I like to do, and again, you'll see that both compressors are exactly dialed in the same, is that I like to stack an overdrive into a compressor. And mainly I only do this with single coil style guitars because it just, shaves off that top end if the sting or bite is a little too high. But you can get a lot of variety of sounds. So sometimes I'll leave this compressor on all the time, as well as this other compressor, and then use the overdrives to affect the gain. So here is the clean boost with the compressor. As opposed to without it. So you hear it just takes off that little edge at the top. And again, it still retains the quality of your pickups. And again, this is one of those things that like a lot of Strat players, a lot of my favorite Strat players do, is that they're using this compressor not really for a bunch of sustain and everything like that, but just to shave off that top end sting. And again, it can smooth out that top end without, affecting the tone too much, because he still retains the character of the single coils. as opposed to without it. So you can hear that it just adds a lot of sustain to it, you know, or a little bit more sustain, and you get, again, a little smoother top end. So that's an option that I always use when I'm playing a Strat. So the next up is going to be the overdrive section. Again, same thing. We're using A, B, C, and D as different flavors of overdrive. So here is the Andy Timmons BB preamp. Again, I'm a huge fan of Andy. And again, what Andy does is he runs his overdrive into a compressor. So again, a really useful overdrive. Sounds great with single coil pickups as well. And again, with and without the compressor, just different flavors. So next up, we are going to be using the Clone Chiron, aka the Klon Centaur. Again, just our classic Klon sound, gives it a lot of edge. And the cool thing is the gain knob is really useful on this. So if that's too much overdrive or not enough, the gain knob is really, really, really musical. So pretty useful on that. Here's the bridge pickup with a humbucker. Okay. So next up, we got the full tone, full drive. That's the full OD. Again, just another flavor of Tune Screamer. Darker, smoother, warmer. Again, could be a flavor that you definitely prefer over the others. And last but not least, the Timothy. This is the Timmy pedal with the dip switch in the up position, if you're familiar with the Timmy pedal. And the interesting thing about the real Timmy pedal is like the knobs are kind of reversed, but you can use the bass and treble knobs here on the Fractal version as normal. So a lot of different flavors of overdrive, something in there for you. And of course, you're going to be able to use a performance page to, you know, change the tone or the level of these. Now, you may hear these and think that they're a little bit louder than the clean side of the amp. Again, I like to use the overdrives to, you know, increase the volume just a hair, because most of the time, if you're going to be kicking on an overdrive, you're going to be going into a louder section of a song. So I definitely find that's going to be useful. Next up, we're going to be using the third drive block as the distortion side of this. So again, this is the compulsion distortion, the OCD distortion. I'm kind of going for a 90s rock, AC/DC, somewhere in there. Again, this is meant for users who just need a wide variety of sounds without having to, you know, jump through a bunch of hoops to change amp channels, etc. And again, that's the humbucker in my Strat, but you can of course use it with single coils. Really great with the volume knob. Okay, next up is channel B. We got the Sonic Drive. This is the Maxon SD9, again, a favorite of Scott Henderson and Mike Landau, other players that I'm a huge fan of in the Strat world. And then next up, we have channel C. This is the Sir Riot. And again, the Sir Riot's kind of like a modern Marshall in a pedal, I guess. Again, I'm a big fan of Sir products. I'm actually using Sir pickups, and I do have a Sir Modern. And last but not least, we got the DS1, the ubiquitous Boss DS1, but it's going to be a modded version. I believe this is modeled after like the Keeley modded version, but I could be wrong on that. So feel free to jump in the comments if you know better. And again, just another kind of distortion sound. And again, one thing that you can always do with all these is, of course, use them in combination with the compressor, and it just gives you a little variation on that tone. So it just gives you a little subtle roll off on the top end. So again, can be very useful for single coil players. I also find that if I use the compressor here and I'm using the bridge pickup of a single coil, so if you have a Strat with a single coil pickup in the bridge, that can just shave off that really, really harsh top end instead of having to roll down the volume knob, the tone knob of the Strat. But again, for me, if I'm playing a 3 single coil Strat kind of thing, I generally keep the tone knob around, 5 or 6 anyway. But this little compressor trick right here that I've learned from some of the greatest players is something that can be very useful for you. And of course, you are going to have access to keep that compressor on here in the compressor section, or this compressor button on the foot controller is going to turn on and off this compressor. This compressor will always just stay on in this preset. All right, next up, we're going to go to the Deluxe Reverb. Pretty generic kind of settings. Again, if you compare this to my previous video with the Les Paul, there's definitely more gain on this because, of course, we're using single coil pickups. And again, one of the things that I always look for amps is that we're looking at the headroom parameter right here. And I always want to get close to that headroom parameter to get to that, where the amp is starting to compress a little bit. The amp is starting to, get to that, quote unquote, edge of breakup sound. And that's usually where the amp will react really well with overdrive pedals, boost pedals, all that kind of good stuff. You can, of course, adjust it if you need more gain or less gain, or more or less volume. You'll be able to do that in a performance page, which I will cover in a later part of this video. This is the Deluxe Reverb normal side. I prefer the normal side of a Deluxe Reverb. I have one. If you're familiar with the Deluxe Reverb, there's 4 inputs on that, the 2 inputs on the normal side, 2 inputs on the vibrato side. The vibrato side usually has a bright switch, bright cap on it, so it's a very common mod to clip that. I don't like that channel sound. In general, it's a little too harsh for my ears, and I think the normal side just reacts to overdrive pedals in a much better way. All right, next up, we're going to go into the chorus. So I just put, some type of modulation effect I think is going to be really useful. You can, of course, swap this out with any of the modulation effects in here. So you can, of course, go to quick build and then instead, swap it. If you're not a chorus type of guy, you can use the phaser or tremolo or whatever, and just swap it out with this slot. And then, of course, you're going to need to adjust the foot controller to do the same, to turn it on and off. But again, I'm a huge fan of Mike Landau. He definitely uses a lot of the chorusing sounds. He usually uses an Aryan chorus, which I will probably dial in at some point using the analog mono or analog stereo. But this is, the Boss Japan CE2 kind of chorus. I think this sounds really great if you use kind of the middle Strat pickup. So again, I'm using the middle and neck. So this is position, I believe, 2, what they like to call it. So you can get that really nice, chorus from the 80s kind of thing. I think that's really cool. And again, I tied the tempo of this to the tap tempo. You can, of course, click on that drop-down menu and select none if you just want a fixed time. But sometimes I like the warble of the chorus to be in time with whatever, and you will have a tap tempo switch on your foot controller. So again, really useful for that kind of 80s kind of guitar thing. And when you stack it with some of these other effects, you can get into that real nice, very cool 80s thing. So for you fans of that kind of sound, stacking all those effects pedals will definitely get you there. All right, next up, we're using the Deluxe Mind Guy delay. This is based off of a Electro Harmonics Deluxe Memory Man. So again, I tied it with just quarter notes to the tap tempo. And of course, you can adjust the feedback in the mix. Now, if you look at some of these, if you've been watching some of my content, you'll always notice that I tend to put all my time-based effects in parallel as opposed to in series. Again, the whole goal of this preset is for the new users who just want a usable preset right out of the box that can cover a wide variety of sounds they can use on their gig tonight. So by all means, some of these settings may not be, quote unquote, standard practice in terms of like where you would set the mix and level and everything. But again, I wanted something that was going to be easy to dial in for users. So if you need more repeats, increase the feedback. If you need more of the effect, just increase the mix. And of course, if you don't want to tie it to the tap tempo, you can click that drop-down menu and select none and leave it at a fixed value. I like having my delays, again, be in time with whatever the song is. And you get, a lot of different version or variations of this. So you can increase the mix if you like, but again, one of the reasons why I like the Deluxe Memory Man is it just kind of stays out of the way, so it's not going to be, super distracting when you play a guitar part. So the next up is the always-on reverb. I prefer the studio reverb. It's based on a Lexicon reverb. Nothing too fancy about this, just adds a little bit of space in your sound as opposed to a dry sound. So I just want it to sound like, the guitar's actually in a room somewhere. Okay, and I generally just leave that on. Now, this reverb is one of the cloud-style reverbs, for all you Strymon fans. So this, again, gives you just like a nice, big washed out reverb. So, can be useful if you are a guitar player who plays it in a worship setting. This can be a very useful sound for you. And of course, if you add some of the other time-based effects, you can do volume swells. And again, I'm using my volume knob. You can, of course, use the volume pedal if that's easier for you. I've always been a volume knob swell guy. Really useful for that kind of thing. So of course you can leave those on or off. And last but not least, this filter block right here, or rather the penultimate, is that this is a volume boost for guitar solos. So if you want your guitar part to just kind of poke through the mix, you can just turn that on. And of course, it's just going to be the same exact tone that you have, whatever you have dialed in, but just louder by 4 dB. So again, with Strats, one of the struggles that I always have is that there's so many different variations on the sounds that you can use the guitar for, but sometimes the pickups leave a little, are totally different in volume. So sometimes I'll turn this on with a single, with one of my out of phase sounds, but then I'll turn it off when I'm going to the humbucker. So again, one of these useful things. Now, in this cabinet, what I did was I dialed in the cabinet. And again, this isn't the same, cabinet style as the Les Paul video because, of course, the mic placement's going to be a little bit slightly different. But one of the things that I did was, of course, I low and high cut the blocks here so it doesn't get too much of that boomy low end, and it doesn't get too much of that crispy top end that's going to compete with cymbals and vocals. Again, most of the time the guitar sits really great within these two parameters. You can, of course, if it's still too boomy, you can raise this low cut. And if it's still too bright, you can bring down this high cut on both cabinets just to darken up the tone a little bit. But this is a good starting point of sitting in the mix. You don't want to compete with the kick drum or the bass in your band with having too much low end in your sound. And again, if you use like a full range cabinet or anything like that, which I'll address in just a second, this can get rid of that boomy low end. So, a lot of complaints or critiques for when people get into the modeling world is that when they use a full range cab or full range type of speaker, you end up running into a lot of issues with the boomy low end. And it's mainly because they don't ever, tweak the low cut on their cabinet block. All right. So now you'll notice here at the very end of this, we have 3 different outputs. So these 2 outputs are basically going to be using outputs 1 and 2 of the FM9 so that you can have independent control using the knobs on the FM9. So for example, you can go output 1 to front of house, output 2 to your full range speaker, and then you can just turn up the output 2 knob to turn up your stage volume without affecting front of house. So I have a lot of videos covering these types of setups on this YouTube channel, so by all means, feel free to watch those for more details. but I think it's really useful to have independent control between what's being sent to you, the sound guy, and what's being sent to your full range cabinet. Now, if you plan on using a power amp and speaker, like a real guitar cabinet, and maybe you have a Matrix GT 800 effects or a Seymour Duncan, you can, of course, use output 3 on that, and then attach this to your power amp, and then attach your power amp to a real guitar cabinet. And again, you'll notice we're splitting off between the cabinet block, so it doesn't have any cab simulation going to the power amp. It only has the amp simulation and whatever effects you have on. And again, that becomes really useful because you can still go to front of house with some amp simulation and go to a power amp and cabinet on stage for just your stage sound. And those are independently controlled. Now with the output 3 knob, make sure you always have the output 3 knob on the FM9 fully clockwise, and then use the power amp volume to adjust your stage volume. Okay, so now at this point, what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of transition over to an overhead shot, and these are going to be, your pedals. So right here, what you can see is that if you are in a standard, the standard setup, you just fired up the FM9, you just loaded the preset, you're generally going to be using this. Now, we're not going to be using any types of scenes in this particular preset because, again, I wanted this to be really easy to dial in. You just have your effects like they were on your pedal board, and then you have your clean boost, your overdrive, your distortion, and then in blue, you have your chorus and delay, your volume boost over there to increase your volume, the big reverb, the tap tempo, and the compressor. Now, if you hold down the tap tempo, it will turn into the tuner. But you can also just tap this. So again, holding down the tap tempo will turn on your tuner. If you are within the screen, the first thing that you want to do is go to your performance page right here. So hitting the page right button will allow you to go to the performance page. And the cool thing about this is this allows you to adjust your settings on the fly for your overdrives as well as your amp. So for example, if you do need more amp gain, if you look at the knob corresponds with each parameter here. So the A knob corresponds with the amp gain, the B knob corresponds with the level, and you can adjust this on the fly just by turning any of these knobs. So for example, if you need more gain in your overdrive, you can turn on knob C. If the overdrive's too bright or too dark, you can adjust the tone of the overdrive with knob D. And if you need the overdrive to come down in level or come up in level, you can turn the knob E. Now to go between the two rows, you can just use the nav buttons here. So again, going up and down, you can do that. So one of the things that you definitely want to do is, leave this on the performance page whenever you're at sound check, whenever you're at rehearsal, whenever you're at gig. So again, if you are going for just turning this on and you're presented with this screen, just hit page right once, and then to get into the performance page. And of course, if you want to go back, you can hit page left and go there. Now, again, this allows you to adjust any of your overdrives. You'll see down here, it says the clean boost and the clean boost level. And again, the A knob will adjust the drive of the clean boost, the level of the clean boost will be for the B knob, et cetera, et cetera. Now, one thing is that if you do need to navigate between any of your presets, you can always hit the home button and then use the value knob to cycle between your presets. So here's a previous preset that I made. You can see that it says Les Paul here. I have, a bunch of blank presets, and you'll see that it defaults back to the factory layouts or whatever layout you have. But in the presets that I'm building, again, I wanted something that you can just drop into your FM9, super easy. It's just going to have a layout that is only for this particular preset. So again, if you see this overriding your layout for any of your other favorite presets, just know that this particular preset only has this layout. Every other preset will always default back to whatever you have. And you can see here, this is just like the standard default FM9 layout for layout number 1. So if I go back to the pedals with the Deluxe, Verb, and the Strat, you can see that you just have access to all your effects. And you can, adjust it from there. So I think that's a pretty great overview of this preset. I just want to thank each and every one of you for, if you've made it this far in the video. I hope you've gotten value out of this. I want to thank any of you who have already purchased some of my previous presets. That means the world to me. So I'm really, really grateful for that. Now, if you need any one-on-one help getting this preset working, or if you just need help dialing in your FM9 for any type of situation that you have, would be happy to help you out. Feel free to reach out to me directly and we can set up a one-on-one session. So outside of that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
I'm falling with you, I'm standing with you. taking